the roles of both the product manager and the software engineer are going to meld. I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think that means every single PM and engineer is going to turn into a product engineer, but I do think there's going to be a spectrum. The product person taking the customer requirements, building their own prototypes, building their MVPs. Now, the engineer who's really interested in getting closer to product, they will then ride shotgun with the PM to get feedback on the MVP. They're listening to the customer conversations. They're listening to here's what I like, here's what I don't like. That way you're reducing that feedback loop. And then the engineer can go back and be like, I know exactly what to do to make this a post MVP product. On the one side of the spectrum, you have the product marketer, and on the complete other side, you have a software architect. But in the middle, there's going to be a huge group of product engineers who do a little bit of everything.
Welcome to LaunchPod, the show from LogRocket, where we sit down with top product and digital leaders. Today, we're joined by Sarah Jacob Singh, CPTO at Medbridge, a digital healthcare platform. In this episode, Sarah shares why AI means all companies have to act like startups again, with product more tightly integrated from engineering all the way to go-to-market, how many product managers are evolving into product engineers, building prototypes, shipping code, and helping developer teams innovate faster. The ways Medbridge is leveraging AI-enabled product engineers to ship big bets weekly instead of quarterly, and why highly regulated industries like healthcare are adopting AI faster than anybody ever expected. So here's our episode with Sarah Jacob Singh. All right, Sarah, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
Yeah, we finally got this one on. It's funny. We got like 2/3 of the way through the process about a year ago. Life happened, and luckily it only took us on our side like not quite a year, but maybe 10 months to pull it back together. So really stoked to have you. This will be a fun conversation. Honestly, I think some cool stuff happened over the past 10 months to 12 months where we're probably even have a better show today than we would have back then.
I think that's right. A lot's changed. Really excited to be on today.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, for context, right, you've spent years and years in the health tech industry, startups, IPOs, product rebuilds, everything in between. Just recently got elevated to being not just chief product officer, but a CPTO, so chief product and technology officer over at Medbridge. So congrats on that. I think that's kind of what we're going to dive into is just the hell is going on with the product role here and why does it just keep expanding. But before we dive into that, maybe you can just give us the TLDR on kind of like, what's the path that led you to this role here?
Yeah, it's a really good point that you made because this role just continues to evolve. But yeah, I've been, in the health tech space and really only in the health tech space for about 12, 13, 14 years at this point. My first real role was at a EHR startup out in Miami, Florida. Built the product team there, built some really interesting solutions while I was there. Really learned my product chops there. Had an awesome time. But at that point, everyone was talking about moving out to the West Coast. That's where the real products are built. So I found my way to Seattle. I joined a great company called Accolade in the employer space, which is a little bit different. No longer selling to providers. Now I'm selling to heads of HR and very, very different motion. And it was interesting because when I was at Accolade, I actually wasn't even on the product team. I was on what's called a solutions team. And so that's really taking the products to market in a new and unique way. So I owned the P&Ls. I worked most closely with probably sales and product marketing, which kind of opened my eyes a little bit as far as, hey, you can build great products, but to really get them successfully into market, there's a little bit more involved with that. And so we went public when I was there, which was very exciting to see. Did a couple of acquisitions as well, which I had never gone through before. So lots of interesting experience on Accolade. And it kind of gave me the itch to go back into startup land. And so I went to a company called Optimize Health, startup out in Seattle, kind of built the product from the ground up, built the team, brought in a CTO friend of mine who's a brilliant guy that I'd known for a long time. He built the engineering team and we kind of ventured into this new space. And I did that for a little while before finally joining Medbridge, which is where I'm at now.
Nice. And then it's only recent that you got elevated to the CPTO role, right?
Right. Yep.
This expansion of product roles is not really that new. I mean, you were involved in go-to-market quite a while ago, but where does the foundational piece of that come from? First of all, let's maybe just start from does it make sense? Does the theory hold water of these kind of roles as they have kind of more and more overlap?
Yeah.
Where's that come from?
I think honestly, what I've seen over the years, because I've had the luxury of being able to be at different types of companies at different stages, I really think it depends on the stage of the organization. So when I was at Accolade and Optimize, for example, we were building brand new products from scratch. And so I had go-to-market either in my org or worked very closely with it. And when I say go-to-market, I'm talking specifically about product marketing and sales enablement, not just commercial org. And the reason that that's so critical and it became so critical is because you're building new products. The sales team and the commercial teams have to know exactly how to talk about it, what it is, what makes it unique, how to objection handle, what are the value proposition. It's not like it's a product that's been sitting there and they've been selling it for 5 or 6 years. This is brand new. So all of the messaging around it is new. The storytelling is new. And so it's not enough to just kind of be siloed and build it. You got to work with product marketing and sales enablement to make sure that all of the great stuff that's being built is actually being delivered to the sales team in a way that you want them to talk about it, right? And I have found that that's really the only way to sell successful products.
I think we've all probably run into the world where the product is doing something and sales maybe isn't. We'll give them a lot of leash on this one and say maybe they weren't enabled to talk about it well, or just wasn't communicated or something like that. But like I think we do tend to see startups move faster is the general. There's exceptions always, but in that world where you're moving quickly and you don't have $100 million ARR under the belt to kind of rely on. It really is. You gotta arm them, right? And so being closer makes sense.
Yeah, and I unfortunately saw it the other way as well when I was first starting out in my career at Carrot Cloud. And I think to myself like, hey, like we built some really interesting things. Like they're not going anywhere. Like why is that? Right. And it's because just the rest of the organization wasn't even aware of what was going on. It's like we're just going through our typical product development life cycle, releasing interesting things. But unless like there's a whole kind of org-wide effort around this is going to be new, we're going to put this in the field, we're going to test some things out, we're going to talk about it differently. There's so many factors to launching a product. And so I learned that the hard way. And then, ever since then, I'm like, hey, I got to stay close to this group.
One of the things that I feel like you're never prepared for when you kind of move into more leadership roles is I always thought I listened a lot when I was coming up, right? Like I thought I always paid attention and kind of knew the nuance. And then you realize how much or how important it is in almost any leadership role that you have like the 3 or 4 key things that you're saying and you just say them over and over and over and over again until you just want to puke. It's going to filter down slower than you ever think it will. And if you're not kind of like just saying the same message to sales, marketing, the product team needs to hear, the go-to-market message, and it all needs to kind of like full circle, or else you're just going to have teams kind of like maybe the marketing team will get it one day and the sales team won't. So you'll have website messaging matching the product. So how did you, did you ever find a secret? I just selfishly, did you ever find a like solve for this?
You kind of nailed it with like repetition annoyingly is key. But I mean, my weekly team meetings, for example, is both the product and the go-to-market team. And so go through like, hey, here's what's happening on the roadmap. Like go-to-market team, what do you think about this? And then they come back and they're like, well, this is what the sales team is saying about this feature. So are you guys even building it right? Like, no, we are. Here's how you should be telling them, how to use it. And it's just the things that are lost in translation. What I always try to look for is instead of it taking like weeks or months to find out and resolve, how do we just shrink that time? Because things will be lost in translation no matter what. Like it's going to happen. And so the name of the game is like, how do you reduce that feedback loop?
For a little while, my answer to that was just rather than listen to podcasts, I just listened to, we use a Gong, and I just listened to Gong calls. They give me good insight into was the messaging making all the way to sales, and it was the kind of core product things, because in our org, marketing is pretty attached to product. So that wasn't a problem, but it's more like, was it filtering all the way down to sales at the end? And you would just find all these little nits of like the big pictures maybe there, but there's a lot of implementation, but there was no way to do it. Now AI, you can just feed it all through like some LLM and have Gong or have ChatGPT be like, oh no, here's a call if it didn't do it right.
No,
so.
No, 100%. Gong is gold. I have my leaders, we spend like a day a week literally just listening to Gong calls. It's like it's so much easier now to pick out like, oh, okay, that's where the misunderstanding is. Like we need to enable them on this piece.
Yeah, I think there's a killer app in there that Gong team close to about just synthesizing takeaways from every call and like how do you kind of surface the really, really important bits. Like Log Rocket for calls. Can you just synthesize a lot of the important bits automatically? One thing you said kind of, I think hit really interesting, and I want to kind of double tap on it is, you kind of talked about why in some orgs did you have to be closer to go to market? Why does product have to be closer to go to market? And it was in startups where things are moving faster. You have to. And now I remember kind of when we talked earlier, you kind of had this angle of basically with AI, almost every org is a startup at this point. We're all rethinking, we're all racing, we're all trying to beat each other with a punch on, taking breadth and everything like that. Does that affect, you think, how companies are looking at this, and maybe this kind of push where we're seeing more kind of expansion of the chief product officer role, not just into go to market, but also into like other aspects as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that this new age of technology around AI is going to shift all of that. And I think it could shift it right or left. Like from an AI standpoint, like our go-to-market team, it feels like they've doubled in capacity. So that's been really cool to see, just in terms of like right now we're doing an ICP refresh project. The things they're able to now pull and put in Notebook LLM and ask questions to and figure out, pull the closed loss reports and see where we're winning. It's just so much faster. And so that's very straightforward from a go-to-market standpoint. I think on the engineering side, like we're seeing huge shifts in the ability to just literally deploy code way faster, right? And what that means is you need more product support, you want more customers that you're able to talk to because you want to hopefully deploy customer features more frequently, right? It's really kind of a spectrum. I think about it as a spectrum between all the way like product marketing on one side, super customer facing, you're out in the field, and then all the way to like the software architect on the other side. And then somewhere in the middle is going to be this AI enabled product engineer. And that's where I think the majority of the work is going to get done.
There's a guy who's on the show recently, I think his episode just published, called Ajia Desway, and he's traveled with us for a lot of like the kind of product leader dinners we've done across the country as well. He has this kind of framework he's put out called the 3-speed problem, which kind of talks about exactly what you were saying there is with AI, right? Like we're seeing an incredible increase in speed in engineers because engineers suddenly are like unlocking stuff way, way faster. It sounds like you kind of have a system here that you're working on of like, how do you though, that throws off the whole balance of right, you have like product, like what do we work on? What do we build? Actually building it, and then how do we go to market? If you speed up one element to that, where historically engineering was the limit, how do you rebalance it?
The whole thing is honestly shifting on its head. And for me personally, like I'm not an engineer. So being put in this role, maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even the expectation is like, okay, well, you're an engineer, right? And like, that's not case. The idea of there needs to be tension between product and engineering, that I think is a very outdated idea in the age of AI, and only because of AI, right? And I think that the reason that that's really changing, like before it used to be, okay, product comes with the business reason of why we need to do this, why we need to build this, and engineering will come with the how, and then talk to us when things are done, right? That's really how it was,
Yeah, it's not, you're not far off. It is just funny to think about it now, like how far it already has changed.
Totally. And even like the most brilliant engineering counterparts that I've ever worked with, CTOs that have become good friends of mine, I'll never forget things like, hey, don't worry about the how. Just tell me what you need. Like, I'll take care of the how. And I used to be like, yeah, okay, you take care of the how. Like, I don't care. But I just think like that it's just shifting on its head with this idea of the product engineer, because my product managers are like, hey, like, I can submit some code here. There's a ticket, for example, like customers were complaining that the text alignment is off horribly on this page. Like, can I just fix it for them? By the time I write the ticket and get it groomed in the backlog for the engineering team to put it into a sprint and put it in production, that's like weeks of wasted time. Right. It's just things are changing. So we're actually doing a hackathon in a couple of weeks, an AI hackathon at Medbridge. All my PMs have their environments set up to be able to write some code, right? And the engineers are actually coming with some of the ideas. We wanted to flip it around a little bit, just to be like, we can meld some of these things together because we're just going to have to be moving faster. Like, our road mapping process, I call it the big bet framework. And it's a several to multi-month process where eventually we land on a couple of big bets for the year. And I think with the new way that we're going to be doing things with AI, I mean, we shouldn't be deploying a big bet every week, every month. Like, why not? The tools at our disposal are just not things that we thought we'd be able to have in the past. And so I really think that the teams are going to meld, the roles are going to change. And this idea of this product engineer, I would bet 10 years from now, like that is the primary position in R&D.
On our end, I think, forget our product, but how we operate has changed a lot in the same way, where we have PMs actually shipping to production. Our designers actually are, building prototypes, but not using like a lovable replit as great as those are. It's using Cloud Code in our actual code base. And what we found is like, right, the typical process was product, maybe work with design, you build a flat Figma file. It just took a ton of time to build like one flat, you called it a prototype, but in reality, it's a flat image file. Yeah. Maybe you did a couple, hey, here's what it should look like kind of partway through the transformation or partway through the flow. But it was still just like the equivalent of making a video, just storyboarding it. And we found now we can enable them to get in. We did the work to train them on this and to build their skill set up, but they can actually build the working flow of the prototype in our product. So it has our design language. And we found the engineers can move so much quicker. Some engineers have great design sense and some don't. It's just not what they're optimized around. But by reducing that one handoff, we were able to move a lot quicker just because that design taste was able to move further through the flow natively. And that's not even like, right, you brought up PM shipping to code and stuff. We're not even doing that. This is just like prototyping still.
I think is a critical first step, because usually either sat in design or God forbid, in engineering, right? So it would take forever. But if we could prototype, in a few days and be like, hey, this is actually what I was thinking. And we're doing that now. Like I'm seeing my PMs come to the table being like, hey, I built this prototype last night. This is kind of what I was thinking. So first of all, back to losing things in translation. Now the engineer can be like, okay, I know exactly what you mean because I see the prototype. Here's where I see potential gaps where things can get complicated, because the engineer's time should be focused on what is complicated, not what is straightforward, right? Like let us deal with the things that are very straightforward and then get the customer feedback. You can ride shotgun while we're getting that customer feedback and then see where things are going to be complicated. And you're right, like the time to production then decreases exponentially. And that's what's so exciting to think about.
I love how you put it there, because I feel like that's, everyone kind of talks about like, oh, we're doing prototyping, engineers have to do less, da 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 da. It's very easy to kind of get lost in feeling like engineers are being minimized, or see where engineers are like, no, AI coding is stupid. That's bad. It's not real coding. But it is. But I think you brought up a really good point. We've done this in other parts of business. It's just a matter of like, there's still a lot of really, really hard problems where you need deep, highly skilled engineers. And just because that bar moves where now some things are easier, that's great. Now you have more time to do the really hard, interesting problems and let people who don't know it as well take care of some of the simpler stuff. And like, you don't have to waste your time on it anymore.
And that's what they're good at, right? And that's what they want. Well, they want to work on the hard problems. And one of the other things that I think is underrated in this whole thing too is like they are dying to know how their products are being used in the market. Like how are customers actually feeling about this? Like, are they utilizing it? Are they using it the way that I thought they were going to use it based on how I built it? Like that feedback loop also now becomes smaller, which is exciting to bring them into the loop on too.
Exactly. That was not set up on purpose, but I feel like I would be remiss if I just didn't do a quick plug on that note, because we are a company that sells software that does exactly that, right? That, that's kind of the point of what LogRocket is how do you give that kind of feedback loop? And it's, watching everything from what you deploy to the session replays, but having the AI watch sessions for you, tell you what's important, where people are having that problem, get that feedback back to product people, to engineers. Because we've seen that loop of talking to product people who say, I don't get this feedback from customer support for 3 weeks afterwards. So how do we kind of tighten that loop up so you can know exactly how people are reacting to what you're building?
But totally. To add to that, one of the exercises that we did around, hey, like in 2026, we're going kind of all in on this AI development. What tools are we going to actually need that we don't have today? And I think two of the most important tools to really do this well is session replay and like some A/B testing functionality, right? Because those are the things that help you go faster. Because if you don't have a tool and it's extending your timeline, like it doesn't really matter what cool technology you're using.
The whole thing is, how can we compress time of decision making and make sure that we, someone brought up like, oh, with AI, don't we kind of aren't we nearing like the world of infinite code? And maybe, but there's still other limitations realistically on this, where you still, velocity, what is it? Someone said at one of the dinners we're at, it was really, really smart. Like velocity is a vector. People forget, not just one thing, and it's magnitude, which is speed, and direction. It's very easy to like rocket ship directly into a wall if you're not careful.
I've been in healthcare my whole career. So highly regulated industry, highly fearful of change. And also just an industry where technology in general has been super behind every other industry until, right? And it's so fascinating to see like the AI adoption in healthcare is above most other industries, which is truly shocking to me. But that is more of a reason and more air cover, frankly, to be like, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is the only way that we're going to do it.
We had a couple people from health tech companies on recently, and you generally think healthcare is kind of a laggard, not in a bad way, but just because you do have, the joke is always, oh, we're not, no one's going to die if we mess up. But in health,
in this case,
you could, yes. Like that's always my like big get out of jail free card. If anything goes wrong, well, it's not like anyone's going to die. Not true in this case, but they were doing everything from, synthesizing patient doctor interactions so the doctors could be more present, to how do you predict supply chains better and basically not have cases where you suddenly, as a provider, find yourself missing important equipment that you need and so you can provide the best care. And it's just really wild to see like all the stuff going on in the space. It's not just the simple kind of use cases. I'm sure there's a lot on the engineering side too that's allowing you guys to move faster.
Exactly. I'm so excited about the shift that we're going to see from, so far the AI tools in healthcare have been a lot of like automating the back office, if you will, right? Like a little bit safer. But eventually, like you're going to need to get into the care space. And that's what we're excited about doing. And you're going to need to help actual providers take care of more patients. Like they just don't have enough time in the day. And this is exactly what these type of AI tools are meant to do. It's like, how can I see more patients? How can I be in the top 1% of providers because I have all of this at my disposal?
Right. So one thing you said, I want to kind of take more time on this idea of like product engineer. I 100% agree. Like you said that and, light bulb went off in my head where I was like, That's going to be a thing. Like just the name alone is too cool. Can you maybe talk about like either what does that look like at Medbridge now? How do you see that kind of developing? What is that? Where does that go?
Well, it's funny you say the name is unique because I've already had a couple of my PMs be like, when do we change our titles? I'm like, okay, hold your horses. But
You need 200 GitHub commits.
I like that. But yeah, I just think, what we touched on earlier, like the roles of both the product manager and the software engineer are going to meld. So what does that look like, right? I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think that means every single PM and engineer is going to turn into a product engineer, but I do think there's going to be a spec, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of product engineers over the next several years. And what I mean by that is basically the product person, instead of, I hate this terminology, but they used to call PMs like the business, right? Like that's not a thing.
They're all the business.
Yeah. They can do more than understand the customer requirements. You know what I mean? So taking the customer requirements, building their own prototypes, building their MVPs. One of the things that we're going to change in 2026 in our roadmapping process is the MVP will be built by the PM.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be passed over to the engineer based on some requirements and a prototype for the engineer to build. The MVP will be built by the PM. So that's already a huge time saver. Now, the engineer who's really interested in getting closer to product, i.e. the future product engineer, they will then ride shotgun with the PM to get feedback on the MVP. So they're listening to the customer conversations. They're listening to the gotchas. They're listening to like, well, here's why the MVP doesn't really work, or here's why it does. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like. That way you're, again, reducing that feedback loop. And then the engineer can go back and be like, I know exactly what to do to make this, a post MVP product, right? And so it's really a combo, like I said, a spectrum. On the one side of the spectrum, you have the product marketer, and on the complete other side, you have like a software architect, if you will. But in the middle, there's going to be a huge group of product engineers who do a little bit of everything. And so we're trying to implement steps, every part of the process to get closer to that.
We're seeing that in a lot of places too, because we have, on the marketing side, I think called the go-to-market engineer. And similar to your point, it's not everyone. We still have brand marketers. We still have non-engineer marketers, but it is just the ability to kind of take on more of, there used to be things you just had to have an engineer to do, and it's now, being enabled to do more of that stuff, and you can just move faster. You can test faster because you can just do it yourself versus having to be like, can you make this change? Let's see what happens. Can you make this change? On the product side, that's going to be even faster. I mean, to take it like to an extreme, we had a guy named Zach Hayes on, several weeks back on the show. He's from a company called Luxury Presence. Have you ever watched like Selling Sunset, like high ticket real estate shows or anything like that?
They're great.
Yeah. Yeah. Bravo is fantastic for that kind of stuff. But so they basically, the website for all these like high-end real estate agents, like they make all those like really, really brilliant websites that they use. They're like a CMS for it. It's not where you would expect huge volumes of AI innovation coming from, but they kind of got in early on this kind of what you were talking about the PM team can build prototypes. They don't need to be spending 3 weeks between, 5 PMs and a couple designers to create one flat file prototype. They can do this in a week. And so they started kind of going to that model and seeing how far they can push it. And now basically, in that kind of 2-week sprint, they're building 8 prototypes or something ridiculous. Yeah, they're testing with real users and they're shipping. You brought up, right, why can't you ship one big bet a week or whatever? That's kind of the point they got to pretty quickly. It's really cool to see they're moving fast.
Awesome. Yeah. That's using it correctly. You know what I mean? Like, that's fantastic. And even on the other side where, like you mentioned, the go-to-market engineer, like that's really interesting. But even non-customer facing product solutions, like every time now we think we need a tool, we ask ourselves internally, well, so for example, recently it came up that we need a new RFP tool. And so we were going to go down the route of like evaluations and understanding pricing, packaging and all this stuff. And then we're like, well, why can't we just build an agent to figure out how to pull all of the information that we need that an RFP tool might do? Right now, there's going to be gaps, but at least it's good practice to be like, I can do this by myself.
Well, it is, I think we all heard the Chicken Littles kind of saying the sky's falling on SaaS because everyone's just going to build their own everything. And that is just patently absurd at this point. Maybe one day, but like.
We're definitely not there. It's so heavily on the industry that you're in and the people that you serve and how trustworthy are they of your solutions. And there's so many factors to that.
I will say like a couple of things we've rolled our own to buying now. This is simpler stuff. I think there's a lot of like little pointy solutions that kind of are going to get hit, not really big things, but I think it helps just in doing the exercise. Like, could we build this? What would we need to? And by kind of going through that,
it's motion that's really important because we want to get people comfortable with like the capabilities that exist, because that's how you start thinking about more interesting functionality.
Yeah. But even just buying a solution, like I feel like it can only make you more aware and able to buy, be a better buyer if you first thought like what's really important. If I was building this, what would it do? And that's an interesting thing. But now all I can think about is, you and the team putting out an RFP for RFP tools. So
Yeah, totally.
I don't know why I got stuck on that. So
I'm
it- it-
adamant that like we should only spend our time building things with valuable IP for our specific market.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a long time before AI is so turnkey that you can just be like, just build me this, build me that, because everything you build, an engineer of ours at one point, who is on our kind of growth engineering team, kind of brought up one day, like, we can build this. Sure, I can spend 3 months, but now it's not just that we built it, we're done. Now that's tech debt forever that I have to service. And now I can't do other things. And like Medbridge does a specific set of things, LogRocket does a specific set of things. It doesn't make sense for us to build our own like interface with our insurance company.
And you mentioned that you had the guy who was from Typeform. We use Typeform and we love
Yeah.
it. But like Typeform is a great example. Like we could have built that into the product that we launched, but like why would we spend however many months doing that when we could spend that time building actual IP for our business, for our customers?
Why build, what is essentially going to be a cost center when you can build an asset that is going to be an appreciating asset potentially? So
Better way of putting it, yes.
So at this point, like, where are you guys on this journey? Like, is it mostly now you have PMs kind of building prototypes and working with engineering? Is it that's an aspirational and you're not quite shipping every week kind of thing?
Oh, I think we're just getting started. I think we have to phase a lot of things out and a lot of things in. I think we have to get over a few hurdles of just folks doing things differently. I think we have to understand like who is actually interested in, because again, it's not for everybody, and that's okay because you need kind of everybody on that spectrum, which is a good thing. But yeah, there's a lot to figure out there, and especially like in our highly regulated industry, like we got to be really careful about what we put in production, what kind of hallucinations are going to happen when the doctor is asking questions. Like there's just like more nuanced things that we have to think through. But I think we've already gotten started, and I expect us in 2026, I expect us to have a completely different road mapping process. I expect us to be able to deploy code into production in a much more, faster fashion. I expect PMs to be able to deploy their own code. I expect engineers to have fantastic ideas like PMs normally do. So I think it's coming, and it's coming quickly, but I also think it's a process.
It sounds like you guys, there's still aspirational room to move, but it sounds like you all have made really good progress already to date. How have you kind of gone about up leveling the team on the tools available? Because no one goes from like zero to mastering all these things out of the gate. You got to there's a process, and everyone's had a different one. But what have you seen that worked to kind of move people in the right direction? And I mean, even conversely, like, where have you found you tried things that just didn't work, or people were buffed the attempted move towards progress?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a couple of things. So first of all, it's not enough to just put AI feature on the roadmap. It's not going to get it done, right? Like you need more of a nudge than that. But I think a lot of it is like, obviously we have to make room for it on the roadmap. Like if we're really going to invest in this, it's brand new functionality. It's a brand new way of building product that they have not done before. So they need more time to get comfortable with it. That's time, I think, is an important element of it. But the other one is just tooling and upskilling, right? So we spent a lot of time in 2025 aligning on the tools that we need, aligning on the programs that we're going to send engineers to, and some PMs. Be like, hey, like we're going to invest in you. Go spend 6 weeks in this AI program. And when you come back, I expect you to teach the whole team what you've learned, and then how we're going to change operational tactics going forward. And I think that's been huge. Like that's been a huge, like, from two perspectives. From the engineer's perspective, is like, okay, they're serious about this. They're investing in this. This is the direction that we're going. We're not turning back. And then the other perspective is just around like, now there's real expectation that this is going to be delivered in production. So I better upskill in this area. Right. I think you need both the tooling and the time, but also the investment in the actual people so they can go learn, because this isn't typical SaaS engineering where you can just learn what you need to do through like osmosis. You actually need to go in and learn it and experience it and use it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's been one of the bigger things I've seen. Is I've been trying to get the team to just go, even if you don't think it has any relevance to what we do at all, go just try and build some zany thing, because just doing it, you're going to get better. It's just exposure. On the Medbridge side, I mean, to get a little operational, but it's interesting. I hadn't thought about this before. Like for us on the marketing side, because we don't have the PII kind of from the product. That's not something we're always using. So like for that side of the team, I was just like, just go build stuff. Use whatever model you want, just expense things, be realistic, like, and kind of keep an eye on that. But we had the kind of head of product and CTO from Zuora on, and they're not medical, but they're billing, and there's a ton of PII in that data set. And they were a lot more approve the foundational models you can use, and what's the interface, and how do we ensure and do training to ensure people understand data risks. Were there elements of that over at Medbridge?
For sure. I mean, and that's like pros and cons, right? Like the con is like, okay, obviously you can move slower and there's more things to consider, et cetera. But there's pros because you really have to be able to do it really well, And so this is what we're doing in this hackathon. Basically, the mandate of the hackathon is like, hey, like the top 3 features are going to go into production. And so you need to not only how to build it, but like how to get it tested, how to get it deployed, and like what safeguards need to be implemented, right? And that's not your typical, hackathons are normally a little bit more vibe codey. But, if you're going to put this code in production, like we got to be super extra careful. You got to have the human in the loop, very likely. And we're probably going to have to, beta test it for several months. Like there's just a lot more considerations in the health tech space, particularly, I mean, think about like selling to like a large hospital system.
Yeah.
Hold on, I need like IT review, I need legal review, I need this, I need that. So there's just like different considerations we have to think through. But I think these types of events like this hackathon forces you to think about that. Like this 2 process is actually a 10-step process, and that's okay. We just account for that.
Yeah. No, that's another place where I think you're going to see, engineers, it's actually not that hard to code a single little thing, right? Like to edit a little bit of code, you don't even really need AI. I think even most product people, you could have Googled it before and you probably figured it out. But like where I've run into problems was, there's like 2 or 3 branches on something, and how do I merge it and commit, and like what's all the nuance around that, and then add in, testing, test coverage, like all the legal and compliance things in the medical side on top of that. Like engineers, that's the expertise that's really hard. You can write a little bit of code. It's the rest of it that's really, makes that job really robust.
And I've had several of them tell me like, hey, like I've used these tools so they can write the code 100 times faster than I can, but it's about merging it and testing it and deploying it and making sure that it didn't break something else. And there's so many other factors that it's not just writing the code. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, as much as I want to talk to you more about, especially the product engineer role, because that sounds really cool, you do have to go back to your dual role as CPTO at Medbridge and keep building this innovative stuff and helping the team move forward. And you had a hackathon to plan. But appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I feel like I learned a lot. I'm sure others will as well. But if people want to reach out, if they have questions, is LinkedIn the best place, or is there a better way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. But this was a lot of fun. Really love talking about this stuff. So I appreciate the time very much. And I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully it's not, 10 more months before we can wrangle together talking it all again. So thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks.
Thanks.